doesn't make any sense. So with that, as an opening, I'm very pleased to yield to the senator from West Virginia, Senator Manchin. 5 minutes.
Madam President.
The senator from West Virginia.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to express my deep concerns with the two wildly divergent proposals for continuing resolution that will be presented to us here today. Now, I might just be a freshman senator, but I'll be blunt. This whole process does not make a lot of sense to me, and I'm afraid it doesn't make sense to a lot of West Virginians or a lot of our fellow Americans. We will likely have votes on two proposals today, and both options are partisan and unrealistic, and neither one will pass. The first is our Democratic proposal that doesn't go far enough. This proposal, which calls for $6.5 billion in new cuts, utterly ignores our fiscal reality. Our nation is badly in debt and spending at absolutely unsustainable and out-of-control levels. In February alone, the federal government outspent revenues by an unacceptable $223 billion. We must turn our financial ship around, but the Senate proposal continues to sail forward as if there's no storm on the horizon. Or we could choose a second, even more flawed measure, a House GOP proposal that blindly hacks the budget with no sense of our priorities or of our values as a country. Now, I didn't grow up in an America that would carelessly cut Head Start and make the playing field even harder for kids born into poverty. Our America shouldn't cut funding for veterans or for border security or for first responders or especially for our children without at least discussing the alternatives. The bottom line, however, is this. Democrats and Republicans are being asked to vote on wildly different proposals for reining in spending. Republicans will say that Democrats don't go far enough, and we Democrats will say the Republicans go too far. The truth is that we're both right, and both proposals will fail. Worse still, everyone in Congress knows that they will fail. The more important question is this: why are we engaging in this political theater? Why are we voting on partisan proposals that we know will fail, that we know don't balance our nation's priorities with the need to get our fiscal house in order? Why are we doing all this when the most powerful person in these negotiations, our President, has failed to lead this debate or offer a serious proposal for spending and cuts that he would be willing to fight for? How does that make sense? The truth of the matter is this: this debate, as important as it is, will not be decided by House Republicans or by Senate Democrats negotiating with each other or past each other. The debate will be decided when the President leads these tough negotiations. And right now, that's not happening. I know it's not easy, and I know that it takes compromise, and I know that it will be partisan and difficult. I know that everyone will have to give up something, and no one will want to relinquish anything. But that is what the American people are demanding. Respectfully, I am asking President Obama to take this challenge head on, bring people together, and propose a compromise plan for dealing with our nation's fiscal challenges, both now and for our future. For me, when I was governor of the great state of West Virginia, like you, Madam President, dealing with our state's problems required bringing people and a diverse group, a strong-willed group of legislators together. But I did, because that was my responsibility. By working together, we were able to tackle the tough fiscal problems that our state faced, and we did it while setting our priorities and protecting the most vulnerable in our state. The bottom line is this: the President is the leader of this great nation, and when it comes to an issue of significant national importance, the President must lead. Not the majority leader or speaker, but the President. He must sit down with leaders of both parties and help hammer out a real bipartisan compromise that moves our nation forward and establishes the priorities that represent our values and all hardworking families. And I truly believe that he can do it. And when we finally come together and agree to a bipartisan solution, we will not only set a new tone for our nation, but we can start to focus on what the American people sent all of us here to do. Start working together to create a more prosperous future for all of our children and our families, and be the America that we all know that we can be. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.
The Majority Leader.
Going to take? Madam President, I'll use leader time.
The Senator has that right.
Madam President, since the moment Republican representatives passed their budget, the now infamous H.R. 1, which is a bill called H.R. 1, it's their #1 issue in the House of Representatives. The country has been waiting to see whether the Senate would repeat the House's mistake in passing it. The House has passed it. The plan the Tea Party pushed through the House is an irresponsible plan. It's a reckless plan. It's dangerous for the health of our economy and certainly the citizens of our great country. The last few days I've come to the floor and explained at length the damage that this Tea Party plan would do on the short term and on the long term. Let me now just again talk briefly about a few of the things that I've talked about before, but I'll talk about them again. Here are some of the consequences. H.R. 1 will fire 700,000 Americans, 6,000 Nevadans. Our budget would create jobs, not cost jobs. It will kick 200,000 Head Start students, the poorest of the poor, little boys and girls trying to get started in life. It'll kick them off their ability to learn to read and do elementary math. Hundreds in Nevada will suffer from that. And this is a very successful early education program. Head Start works. It would slash college students' Pell Grants, the financial aid so many rely on to afford to go to school. It will eliminate job training investment at a time we need them the most. It would pull the plug on 600 renewable energy jobs in the largest solar plant in Nevada. It would fire 600 Nevadans who work at community health centers, which hurts those workers as well as the neediest Nevadans who need this help every day. It would arbitrarily slash programs that fight crime and keep our neighborhoods safe. It would slash homeland security investments that keep Nevadans safe and our country safe. And, Madam President, we have 55, 60 million people who visit Las Vegas every year. It's important that we keep them safe also. The mean-spirited bill, H.R. 1, eliminates national public broadcasting. Now, that is really saying a lot, isn't it, Madam President? Eliminates National Endowment of Humanities, National Endowment of the Arts. These programs create jobs. The National Endowment of Humanities is the reason we have in Northern Nevada every January the Cowboy Poetry Festival. Had that program not been around, the tens of thousands of people who come there every year would not exist. National Institutes of Health whacks that. When we're at a time in the history of this country when we're on the verge of breakthroughs on some of the most devastating diseases known to man, they're cutting that program. There are scores of other things I could talk about. But in short, Madam President, the Republican plan they want to push through the Senate is all smoke and mirrors. It cuts the deficit in the name of a stronger future, but cuts the most important ways we strengthen our future. It's counterproductive. It's bad policy. It is going to cost America 700,000 jobs. This isn't some figure I just picked out of the air. Economists agree with this, including Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's, who, by the way, worked during the Republican nominee for president, John McCain. He was his chief economic advisor. Their plan slashes billions from the budget and hopes no one will look past the price tag. H.R. 1 is not just about numbers. It's about people. It's about programs. It's about little boys and girls and Head Start. It's about senior citizens whose programs are going to be cut. Because Republicans know that once the country sees what's in the fine print, they'll run away from that as fast as they can. Now, Madam President, it seems that Republicans themselves have finally read their own budget over here in the Senate, because now they're even running from H.R. 1. Over here in the Senate, it wasn't us that moved H.R. 1 forward. It was the Republicans. We have a procedure here in the House, this body, called Rule 14, that allows bills to move forward. And the Republicans decided they wanted to get to H.R. 1. So they jump-started H.R. 1. They wanted to make sure that they let their buddies in the House know that they wanted to have a vote on H.R. 1. Last Thursday at 4 o'clock, right back here in the Vice President's office, there was a meeting held with me, with Senator McConnell, Speaker Boehner, Leader Pelosi, and the Vice President of the United States. The purpose of the meeting was to move forward on these budget negotiations. We had a very good meeting. Everyone was very kind and thoughtful and considerate to everyone. And the idea that we came up with in that meeting is that what we should do to move these negotiations forward is have a vote on H.R. 1, a vote on H.R. 1, and a vote on our alternative. That was the agreement, agreed upon by the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, by the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, by the Majority Leader, Harry Reid, by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner, and the leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. That was the agreement we made. We would come here today and have a vote on H.R. 1 and on our alternative. After we had made this agreement, staff was called into the meeting. We told them what was done. Now, over here, the Republicans don't want to vote. They don't want to live up to the agreement that was made. I repeat, last Thursday, the leaders of both houses of Congress and both parties met with the White House. We decided this was a way to move forward. We agreed, I repeat, to hold a vote on H.R. 1, the Republican plan, that they moved to the Senate floor themselves. And then, of course, as I said, we'd vote on the Democratic alternative, which makes much smarter cuts and more solid investments. But that would be up to the body to decide. Then we would return to the negotiating table and try again to find common ground. There is no question that was the agreement made. No question. That was the deal. But now Republicans are reneging on that deal. They don't want to vote on their own bill. They want some procedural votes. I'm told some procedural votes. Well, Madam President, they're going to have an opportunity to vote on H.R. 1. I may have to jump through all the procedural hoops to do it, in spite of the fact that they made a deal that we would move directly to have those votes. We're going to do that. The Republicans are going to have to vote on that terrible bill, H.R. 1. They're going to have to vote on it. They don't want to vote on their own bill. As I've said before, the budget we outline on our votes on that budget reflect our values. Values like helping our nation recover and prosper, giving a strong education for our children, encouraging innovation, keeping America competitive. But another value I hold pretty important is how about keeping one's word? Where I come from, people keep their word. I'm disappointed now the Republicans refuse to keep their word. There are 10 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session. Senator McConnell and I have approved this. I would ask consent that these requests be agreed to, that the requests be printed in the record.
Without objection. Senator from California.
Tell me what the order is right now.
The Democrats control 51 minutes and 26 seconds.
And how much more time do I control?
The senator may speak for up to 10 minutes total.
Thank you.
She has spoken for 4 minutes.
Okay. Well, my intention is to yield to Senator Udall, and he and Senator Merkley are going to engage in colloquy. But I wanted to just open it up before I yield to them in this way. Senator Reid has laid out the devastating consequences of H.R. 1, which the Republicans have put forward as their plan to cut the budget. Devastating. It's a jobs killer. It's a killer for the middle class. And they said they'd have a vote on it. Now they don't want to vote on it. Well, we're going to have a vote on it. It's very important that we have the American people understand the various plans to cut the deficit. Well, one of the things in H.R. 1 of the many is a huge, huge cut to the Environmental Protection Agency. And there's 2 points I want to make, and then I'm going to turn it over to my friends for the remaining time. And that is that in 1970, the Clean Air Act was passed. The vote in the Senate was 73-0. The vote in the House for the Clean Air Act was 374-1. Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air Act. H.R. 1 destroys the Clean Air Act by giving the largest cut of any agency to the Environmental Protection Agency, and then, as if that's not enough, prohibiting the EPA from enforcing pollution laws. In 1977, there were the Clean Air Act amendments signed by Jimmy Carter. There wasn't even a roll call vote. It was so popular. In 1990, George Herbert Walker Bush signed the Clean Air Act amendments. So 2 out of the 3 presidents were Republicans. This passed 89-10 in the Senate and 401-25 in the House. The last point I'll make is this. The Clean Air Act and the EPA are strongly supported still by the American people. The only place we have a lack of support is right here in the Congress by our Republican friends primarily. The American Lung Association says 69% think the EPA should update the Clean Air Act with stricter air pollution limits. 68% believe Congress should not stop the EPA from enforcing Clean Air Act standards, which is just what H.R. 1 does. And 69% believe EPA scientists, not Congress, should set pollution standards. So our friends on the other side, through H.R. 1, are acting as if they have all the brilliance in the world, all the scientific, credentials in the world. Well, they don't. So at this time, I'm going to yield to Senator Udall, but I'm also going to ask unanimous consent that we continue with our time until Senator Kerry comes to the floor to talk on his particular subject.
Without objection.
Thank you. Senator Udall, and he and Senator Merkley are going to speak.
Madam President.
Mexico.
Thank you, Madam President. And let me first of all thank the chairman of our Environment and Public Works Committee, Barbara Boxer. She's done an excellent job in terms of outlining in our committee what the real issues are that are facing us. And the big issue is, as you have heard today from Leader Reid and now from Chairman Boxer, H.R. 1, or what we call the House Republican budget, which is it's not only a budget bill, it's loaded up with all these environmental riders that really attack the public health of Americans and attack it in a very bad way because we're repealing public health laws. I want to reflect like Chairman Boxer did on the history here, but before I do that, I would just ask unanimous consent to insert in the record my full statement, because I'm going to engage in a colloquy with Senator Merkley, and my full statement as read in the record at this point.
Without objection.
First of all, we need to look a little bit at the history of what has happened here, because we used to have tremendous bipartisan support in terms of these public health and environmental laws. I remember the glory days of the Senate in the 60s and 70s. It was the Senate, and the chairman has talked about this, that passed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, created the Environmental Protection Agency, passed the Endangered Species Act. All of those were passed and created with significant bipartisan support. In fact, anywhere from 8 to 12 Republicans were joining in and felt that these were strong laws and needed to be passed. And you don't need to look very farther than the majorities. In 1967, the Air Quality Act passed 88-0. 1970, the Clean Air Act 73-0, championed by a number of Republican senators. In 1990, the Clean Air Act, championed by President George H.W. Bush and his EPA administrator, Bill Riley. That vote in 1990, 89-10. So broad bipartisan support. What has happened here? What has happened to the Senate and to the Congress in terms of protecting public health? And I would suggest that what we've seen with this House Republican budget is very strong, powerful special interests weighing in, and those folks on that side kind of catering to that kind of mentality, rather than looking out for public health and looking out for the American people. I want to talk a little bit about the impact of this bill on Americans and on public health and on New Mexicans, and look at the disastrous things. But at this point, I want to ask and engage with Senator Merkley in some of those damaging things that he sees in terms of public health, environment, in this H.R. 1 or this House Republican budget. And so I would yield to Senator Merkley at this point.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join my colleague from New Mexico in discussing both the general environment, the environment in which we no longer have strong bipartisan support for clean air and clean water that we once had, and some of the specifics of the House Republican budget and the damage that they would do to American citizens across this country. Just to give you a small sense of this, in 2010, the Clean Air Act prevented 1.7 million asthma attacks, 130,000 heart attacks, and 86,000 emergency room visits. That is why leading public health experts opposed these cuts, groups like the American Lung Association, which said House Resolution 1 is toxic to public health. Now, why is that the case? I'll just give a couple examples and turn this back to my colleague. One example is that it would prohibit standards for toxic air pollution, including mercury, lead, arsenic, dioxin, and acid gases coming from coal-burning power plants. A second is that it would prohibit standards for toxic air pollution coming from industries burning coal and oil. A third is that it would prohibit guidance on how to protect clean drinking water from mountaintop mining. A fourth is it would prohibit standards for handling hazardous waste from burning coal just 2 years after a disaster in Tennessee caused 1 billion gallons of coal waste to spill into people's neighborhoods and homes. I have a longer list, but I'll stop there and note that these impacts on water and air occur to citizens in every state under House Resolution 1, the House Republican budget.
Madam President and Senator Merkley, if the American people really knew what was happening here, I would think they would be out in the streets here in Washington like we're seeing in Wisconsin, where people are turning out and are energized, because the rollback of these environmental laws really is a rollback on public health. And as Senator Merkley, as you have talked about very persuasively, I mean, we're talking about preventing heart attacks, preventing emergency room visits. In New Mexico alone, over 170,000 residents suffer from asthma. Over 47,000 of those are children, and thousands suffer from respiratory illnesses. With the rollbacks in the House Republican budget, those folks are going to suffer a lot more. It's going to impact vulnerable populations. The House Republican budget put hundreds of thousands of New Mexicans at greater risk from pollution, from power plants, oil refineries, mines, and cement kilns. The Clean Air Act has had a very positive impact over the years that law. It has cut 6 major pollution still claims 70,000 lives per year, 3 times that of car accidents. So if we weaken that act by these riders and this approach in the House Republican budget, that number is going to rise. The number of lives that are claimed each year are going to rise. And that's why one of the major organizations that monitors this, the American Lung Association, opposes these environmental rollbacks in the House bill. The Clean Air Act also protects pregnant mothers and developing children from mercury, a neurotoxin that creates problems in brain development, including attention and memory problems. And mercury comes out of the smokestacks into the air, deposits in our water, and is also consumed in the fish that we eat. And just to give a little example, in New Mexico, and Senator Merkley, you may have this up in Oregon too, we have these coal-fired power plants that are emitting mercury. It gets into the streams. We now have a warning on every stream in New Mexico. Every stream in New Mexico, if you're going to catch fish and eat them, don't do it more than about once a week. And they actually warn pregnant women to not eat the fish from New Mexico streams at all. So I don't think people realize how much pollution there is out there. With that, Senator Merkley, I would yield back to you for any additional comments you have. And I see our good friend Senator Cardin here is on the floor and also has been a real leader on this, and I know he wants to speak also.
Well, I'll say that just one key aspect is that the House Republican budget would cut $2 billion from EPA's Clean Water and Safe Drinking Water Infrastructure Loan Program. Now, as I'm going around my state, holding a town hall in every single county, I hold a meeting with the city and county leaders in advance of the public meeting. And at virtually every one of these gatherings, I hear stories from mayors and chairs of county councils who talk about the challenge they have with their aging infrastructure, both on their water supply and on their wastewater disposal. And that aging infrastructure needs to be upgraded as plants wear out and as we discover more challenges that we need to address. And so cutting the loan program that supports our communities, our rural communities, our suburban communities, our urban communities, all of our communities, in providing clean water to their residents and of helping dispose of and treat wastewater would be an enormous mistake. That partnership is absolutely crucial to communities who cannot otherwise afford this infrastructure. So that would mean more sewage and other pollution going into our waterways and less treatment of water we take out to drink.
Madam President, just in conclusion here from my perspective, I think the most important thing at this point in our history in America is that we take actions here on the Senate floor that are going to create jobs, that are going to try to move us forward in terms of our economic development. And this House Republican budget is devastating in terms of creating jobs. Leader Reid, I think, said 700,000 Americans are fired as a result of this job-killing bill, this House Republican budget. It is a devastating thing to a fragile economic recovery that we have going on right now. So I'm very happy to hear very happy to hear that Senator Reid says we're going to bring the House Republican budget here to the Senate floor. We're going to have an up or down vote on that budget, and it will be out there. We're going to have lively debate until we have that vote, and it'll be out there for the American people to see the devastating consequences it could have if we adopted it. And with that, Senator Merkley, I know that you had some
Senators, if I could just take my time back, I just want to thank you both. We have only 10 minutes remaining, and we have 3 more speakers, so I thank you very much. And before I yield to Senator Cardin, I thought I could be for 5. Now I'm told there's 2 more speakers. It'll be about 3 minutes. Let me just put 2 charts up here and yield to him for 3 minutes. Look at this picture. I say to my colleague from Maryland, these are the most difficult times when the air is dirty on these children. This is a beautiful child. She can't breathe, and she has asthma. And the reason we passed the Clean Air Act is because of kids like her and others who are gasping for air, literally. And the other thing I want to show you is since we have put the Clean Air Act into place in the 70s, this is an incredible chart that shows a significant drop in smog-related health advisories in Southern California, the most polluted area. So look at this. We have gone from 166 days where there were warnings for people to stay indoors to 0 days in 2010. The Republicans in H.R. 1 devastate the EPA's budget, plus they tell them they can't enforce the Clean Air Act. Let me just say this. If my Republican friends want to repeal the Clean Air Act, just bring it on, and we'll have a debate here. Don't do it through the guise of deficit reduction. So now I see I have 3 colleagues here for the remaining time. I'm going to ask unanimous consent that we have till 20 after until we turn it over to Senator Kerry. And then I'm going to yield 3 minutes to the following: Senators Cardin, Lautenberg, and Whitehouse.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President.
The Senator from Maryland.
Madam President, let me thank first Senator Boxer for her leadership on this issue and bringing us together to point out that the House-passed budget bill, what harm it will do to our environment. I start off by saying when you look at the Republican budget plan in the House, it not only devastates important investments in our environment, it doesn't bring us to a balanced budget, because all the savings that they get in these draconian cuts to our discretionary domestic spending is offset by extending the tax cuts. We lose all the savings through their tax policy. But today I want to talk about a non-money issue, at least a rider that was put on the House budget. And let me read what it says. The bill says that none of the funds made available in this act may be used to implement the Bay Restoration Plan now underway. And I'm talking about the Chesapeake Bay program, a matter that I've talked about on this floor many times. What does that mean? That means none of the funds in the budget can be used in the 6 states that are in the watershed, including Maryland and the District of Columbia, to implement their plan. Each of these states are relying on getting federal funds under the state revolving fund to deal with wastewater treatment plants. Those funds would be denied. None of the money could be used for the state water programs. None of the funds could be used to watershed groups to restore local streams. We have school groups and civics associations participating with us to clean up the Bay. Those programs would come to an end. It is estimated this one rider alone will cost the Bay restoration effort in Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia by more than $300 million. Our efforts to clean up the Bay. What does that mean? It means job loss in our areas by far. We're talking about jobs here, and it also puts our citizens at risk as far as their health is concerned. More and more health-related illnesses are coming as a result of poor quality of water in our community. Let me mention just one other issue, and that is that the House-passed budget, the Republican budget, would slash the EPA budget by by 33% over the FY10 level. That's one-third of reduction in EPA's budget. It threatens the clean water protections for our lakes, streams, rivers across our country by cutting $2 billion from the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Now, I mention that because in my state and around the nation, we're seeing more and more disasters occurring as a result of water main breaks. We saw what happened in Prince George's County, Maryland. That's within the last year. We saw what happened in downtown Baltimore when a water main broke and turned our downtown into unpassable streets. We saw what happened in Montgomery County, Maryland, where River Road became a river and people had to be rescued from their cars. This, once again, is about jobs. It creates jobs, but it also provides us with safe drinking water in our community. For all these reasons, Madam President, it's important that we do not allow the House-passed budget to become law, and I thank my colleagues for participating in this. I yield the floor.
The Senator from New Jersey.
No, there's a lot of talk these days about dangers posed to our national security from faraway places, revolution in Libya, war in Afghanistan. They get full attention. But what about the dangers from inside our nation? We have a domestic danger that is directly visible, and we're about to stoke that fire. House Republicans are going after something as fundamental as the air that our children breathe. The budget they recently passed calls for the gutting of the Clean Air Act, which is a clear and present danger. We look aside and fail to really solve a major fiscal problem because we won't produce the revenues. Instead, we'd rather punish the families across America. The Clean Air Act protects our children from toxic chemicals in the air and illnesses like asthma and lung cancer. Last year alone, that law prevented 1.7 million cases of childhood asthma and more than 160,000 premature deaths, according to EPA. The numbers are big, but they loom even larger when it's your child. And as we often say here, what goes around comes around. And if you really want to know the value of the Clean Air Act to America's families, talk to the millions of parents who live in fear of their child's next asthma attack. In my family, that's the case. My grandson has asthma, and every time he goes to play sports, which he does actively, my daughter looks for the nearest emergency facility. The House Republican budget says to these families, we're here. We're acting as accountants. We don't have time for this humanitarian stuff. We can't afford it. If you don't like regulations, then we ought to get rid of red lights. It sure would speed up traffic. Those red lights, they're a bore. Maybe they'd like to get rid of the air traffic control system. Why should pilots sit and wait up in the air and be told when to land? The bureaucratic system is terrible. By the same logic, Madam President, House Republicans say, let's get rid of these environmental regulations. They interfere with our freedom to pollute. The House budget doesn't even allow us to control mercury emissions. Mercury. It's brain...
For 3 minutes.
I'm sorry?
Senator has spoken for 3 minutes.
Well, 5 minutes was my understanding. What happened? Well, I was told originally that it was 5 minutes. I asked unanimous consent that the rest of my speech be included in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
First, let me thank
recognized for 3 minutes.
Chairman Boxer for pulling us together on this. I want to make 3 quick points in the brief time that I had. The first is that the House bill cuts $2 billion out of clean water and safe drinking water infrastructure at a time when EPA calculates that we have a $600 billion water infrastructure deficit. We are behind on rebuilding America's clean water infrastructure, and yet they cut it. We need the infrastructure. We could certainly use the jobs. This is a very misplaced cut. The second, from a clean air perspective, the bill cut $60 million from state and local grants that ensure clean air and clean water and attacks clean air programs. In 2010, the Clean Air Act is estimated to have saved 160,000 lives compared to where things would have been without it. Physicians for Social Responsibility say that just U.S. coal plants alone cause about 554,000 asthma attacks each year. Why do I talk about asthma? Rhode Island has a 10% rate of asthma, despite not having a single coal-fired power plant. Why is this? Because out in the Midwest, they're pumping their pollution up into the sky where it falls down on our New England states. Average smokestack height has increased from 200 feet in 1956 to over 500 feet tall in 1978. In 1970, there were only 2 U.S. smokestacks over 500 feet tall. By 1985, there were 180 smokestacks taller than 500 feet. 23 were over 1,000 feet tall, so tall they had to be put on the air traffic control maps. Why are they doing that? Because it exports their pollution to us. A state like Rhode Island has no shot at controlling the pollution that dumps on us that originates in other states if there is not a strong national EPA to do this. So it is really vital to us, and asthma is a real threat. The last thing I'll say is that on carbon pollution, we hear a lot of talk about this, but there are certain things that are just factual at this point. It is a fact that over the last 800,000 years, the atmosphere has been in a range between 170 and 300 parts per million of CO2. That's a measurement, not a theory. In 1863, a long time ago, time of the Civil War here in this country, an Irish scientist named John Tyndall determined that carbon dioxide has a blanketing effect in the atmosphere, and increased concentrations of carbon dioxide warm the Earth. That has been textbook science for more than a century. It is not a negotiable or debatable proposition. We have dumped 7 to 8 million gigatons every year of carbon dioxide, and it is having an effect. We are now at 391 parts per million, well outside of a benchmark that has lasted for 800,000 years.
The senator has spoken for 3 minutes.
I appreciate the warning. I yield back to the floor.
Madam President,
the senator from Massachusetts.
Okay. Madam President, I understand I have 30 minutes.
27 and a half, I am told.
I would ask unanimous consent to keep it to the original 30.
Without objection.
Madam President, I want to first of all thank my colleagues. I want to thank the senator from California and other colleagues who have been involved in an important discussion here. And I will say a few more words about that in the course of my comments. But let me just begin by observing that last week, like a lot of colleagues here, I voted in favor of the 2-week continuing resolution in order to avoid a government shutdown. But I will say that I did so extremely reluctantly, and I'm not inclined to continue to do that in a series of hatchet budgets that continue to make cuts without regard to the larger budget considerations that we need to be considering. And I know colleagues on both sides of the aisle voted reluctantly. But frankly, Madam President, it's insulting and it's frustrating that we're reduced to passing incremental allowances just to keep the government functioning. And this is just the work on this year's budget, something that should have been passed for an entire year last year. The impact of this kind of staggered stop and start, keep them guessing, budgeting on programs and on projects that, frankly, need to do some long-term planning actually costs Americans money, and it costs Americans long-term competitive capacity. Run a business the way we're running these kinds of programs, and you go under if you had a month-to-month, week-to-week, 2 weeks to 2 weeks budget process. No department head can plan for the long term because they really don't know what they're going to have, how much they're going to spend. Projects that need to begin don't begin. And that costs America leadership, and it costs us money. No wonder Americans are frustrated, Madam President. All we do is bounce from one short-term, stopgap solution, Band-Aid approach to another, always deferring the tough decisions and the adult conversation, which is exactly what the American people sent us here to engage in. I come here today to appeal to the common sense and conscience of our colleagues. This is not the time to create a fundamentally political budget document steeped in ideology. It's not the time to put forward a set of choices, many of which have absolutely nothing to do with reducing the deficit or the debt, but everything to do with ideological goals long sought by some, now cloaked in the guise of deficit crisis in order to achieve what they've never been able to achieve to date. Everyone here knows. You know, you have private conversation with colleagues, and they'll nod their heads and acknowledge to you how serious this budget situation is. We need a serious conversation about our fiscal situation. And it begins with a comprehensive discussion about discretionary spending. Yes, that has to be on the table. But what about entitlements? What about revenues, Madam President? Everyone here knows that we have to work towards a long-term solution in order to reduce the budget deficit and the staggering debt of our country. And we're going to have to reduce some federal spending and make appropriate changes in entitlement programs in order to do that. And when we're honest about it, it means you have to talk about everything. Revenue, tax reform, spending, and entitlements. A lot of Americans appropriately ask, what are we doing with 57,000, 60,000 pages of a tax code? How many Americans have their own page? But you can run through it and find an awful lot of big interests, big business, folks who can afford big lobbyists. They get their own pages, but the average American appropriately feels left out and abused by that process. That ought to be on this agenda, the simplification of the code and the fairness of the code. In addition, we need to obviously talk about Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. Social Security, frankly, is easy to fix. We fixed it in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan. I was here when we did those changes. We can do this again. That's not complicated or challenging to the American. We can make that safe and whole throughout the century so that our children and our grandchildren and their children have the opportunity to trust in the Social Security system. That's doable with minor tweaks. What's far more complicated and challenging is Medicaid and Medicare. And I assure my colleagues who are out to undo the health care bill passed by President Obama that if that were undone, those Medicare costs are going to soar. And the medical choices before our country are going to become even more complicated. Now, back in December, a number of our colleagues understood and embraced exactly what I'm saying right now. Senators, Republican and Democrat alike, Senators Durbin, Conrad, Coburn, and Crapo, had the courage and the willpower to put on the table the whole set of choices when they embraced the Debt Commission's report that was appropriately entitled A Moment of Truth. Nobody liked every proposal that was set forth by the Commission, not even the commissioners themselves. But they did it in order to put everything on the table for the discussion by us. We're the body responsible to make these choices, we in the House, and yet the budget sent us by the House is an unbelievably irresponsible exercise in avoidance, as well as a set of choices that will take America backwards. And I'm not exaggerating about that, and I'll go into that in a moment. Let me just cite what the Commission said to remind us about our responsibility. They said that throughout our nation's history, Americans have found the courage to do right by our children's future. Deep down, every American knows we face a moment of truth once again. We cannot play games or put off hard choices any longer. Without regard to party, they said, we have a patriotic duty to keep the promise of America to give our children and grandchildren a better life. Our challenge is clear and inescapable. America cannot be great if we go broke. Our businesses will not be able to grow and create jobs, and our workers will not be able to compete successfully for the jobs of the future without a plan to get this crushing debt burden off our backs. Madam President, I think every senator probably agrees with that, but is every senator prepared to do something about it? Certainly this budget sent us by the House is an avoidance of that kind of discussion and the responsibility that the Debt Commission placed on our heads. So we ought to get serious. For the fiscal year 2011, the administration's budget projects a deficit of $1.6 trillion. Without changes in our current policies, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that our federal debt will be 95% of GDP, the gross domestic product of our nation. Today, as we are here, we are borrowing 40 cents of every single dollar that we spend. Borrowing 40 cents. We borrow a lot of it to be able to afford to buy the source of our energy from other countries, and much of the dollars that we borrow in order to go into debt to buy the energy from other countries winds up making us less secure. This is not a smart cycle, not a virtuous cycle, and certainly not something that we're locked into. We have a whole set of other choices. Let me also point out to my colleagues, revenue right now, spending is at the highest level as a share of our economy that it has been in more than 60 years. We are spending more than we've spent as a share of our economy at any time in 60 years. But we are also collecting less revenue than we have ever collected in the last 60 years. There's something wrong with that equation. It seems to me clear. Many of us objected and opposed the tax cut that wound up putting us in this predicament, that we've been on a binge of political sloganeering. And the political sloganeering has been appealing to the easiest instinct of every American. Who doesn't feel they don't pay too much? But the fact is, the burden that we pay is far less than many other countries. It's at a mean of where it's been in our history. And, as I said, less revenue than any time in 60 years. That's part of what contributes to our debt. And it also robs us of a whole set of other choices in terms of American competitiveness. Now, let me point out, to listen to the members of the House and some of our colleagues, you'd think the President didn't do anything about this. In fact, the President is the only person who's put a budget before us, a realistic one. The President is the only person who's really put in a plan to reduce the overall debt, not just a CR for a temporary basis, but an overall budget with a plan for how you grow America and reduce our deficit. And the President's budget does significantly reduce deficits. I remember in the 1990s when we faced this very question, and I remind my colleagues, we did balance the budget. The last party presiding to balance a budget was President Bill Clinton. And we did it jointly, working together in a responsible way. And it wasn't so critical that we turned the revenue line that was going down and the spending line that was going up. It wasn't so important that we turned them around from that divergence. What was critical was, or that they all met within 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, What was critical was that we sent a message to the financial marketplace and to the American people that we were serious about turning those lines around so that they met at some point. That's what's critical here. And I believe that as we go forward, we have a responsibility to understand that we need to have a responsible set of choices put in front of us as we go forward. We're locked in a debate that is not actually trying to find the common ground right now. Ask the question, is everything on the table in a serious effort to create jobs and advance America's economic leadership? Is it really impossible for us to sit down together across the aisle and come to an agreement as to what helps us grow and what doesn't help us grow? Is it really true that American senators have the inability to be able to agree as to where the benefit comes to the economy and the multiplier effect with respect to science research or technology research or other kinds of things that we can excite in the private sector? Completely absent from this debate is an honest discussion of what actions only the government is actually equipped to take in order to bolster our global competitiveness. Every CEO in America knows that there are some things that, in fact, only the government can do. Look at President Eisenhower's national interstate highway system in the 1950s. By today's standards, you couldn't build it. It wouldn't happen by today's standards. But the fact is that more than 30 or 40%, maybe 50% of America's productivity came as a consequence, increases came as a consequence of the building of the interstate highway system, not to mention billions of dollars worth of spin-off jobs and tax revenues to our communities. We're still living off that inheritance. We are living off the infrastructure investments of those who went before us. And today, China is investing 9% of its GDP into infrastructure. Europe is investing 5% of its GDP into infrastructure. The United States, just about 2%, slightly less. That's what we're doing, so that we have a $2.2 trillion infrastructure deficit. Mr. President, what we haven't been discussing in this debate is what we need to invest in, a coherent strategy, a policy to make certain that we're not held hostage to oil and instability in the Middle East. The United States could become the first country to have 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2015 and ensure that 80% of our electricity comes from clean energy sources. And with that comes jobs. We need a cutting-edge, high-speed wireless data network. We still don't have one. We're going backwards. We invented the technologies. We used to be number 3 or 4. Now we're drifting back to number 16 or number 21, depending on whose measurement you look at. By any measurement and any standard, we're going backwards, while other countries are going forwards, and it's because we're not investing and we're not making it attractive for the private sector or the private citizen to be able to achieve this. America has always been a competitive country. Our DNA is innovation and creativity and entrepreneurial activity. And the fact is that right now, we're not doing the things that we could do to joint venture with the private sector to attract the best jobs and create the best opportunities. We have to become that nation again. That's what our budget ought to be discussing, and we ought to be able to agree across party lines as to how we do that. The budget passed by the House of Representatives not only doesn't present a realistic set of choices with respect to how you make America competitive and create higher-paying jobs and grow our economy, not only does it not do that, it actually strips away the opportunities to do that. It takes us backwards, Mr. President. The House budget is going to lower the deficit by only 6% because they're focused only on domestic discretionary spending. They don't focus on defense spending. They don't focus on Medicaid, Medicare, entitlements. They don't focus on some of the waste and duplication within the system. They just strip away at a whole bunch of programs that many of them have opposed for their entire life in politics and voted against in the first place. And they're using the opportunity of this budget to put those choices back on the floor and to try one more time to press an ideological agenda. That's why only 13% of the budget is being focused on in what they're doing. They've sworn off any discussion of the really hard choices. So here we are, 3 months after the Commission put forward its important proposals, and the United States Senate is trapped in a political moment when what we really need is a moment of truth. Mr. President, we have to find a way to make these tougher choices. Now, I want to be clear about what I think they are. I would ask my colleagues, do we want a government that is too limited to have invented the Internet? A lot of people don't think about that. But the fact is, the government invented the Internet. It was a spin-off from ARPA, from research into how we might be able to communicate in the case of nuclear war. And so we were creating this communications network, which became the Internet, and then the private sector saw the opportunities and took those opportunities and translated them into what we have today, which has revolutionized the way people communicate and do business. But it came from the government, Mr. President, just as digitalization came from government research. The space program, which also produced Gore-Tex and microwave and Teflon and a host of other products that are now out in the marketplace where we've created millions of jobs. The Internet created 1.2 million jobs and has added 2% to the gross domestic product of our country. And we want to have a country that's so limited that we don't do those kinds of things. Taxes so low that everybody feels good, thinks they're better off, but we don't do the research that's necessary to create jobs and new industries and fill the Treasury with the revenue that educates a lot of our children and provides cures to diseases and opportunities for poor people to be able to break out of poverty and touch the brass ring of America. We have to get past the slogans and the sound bites. We have to reason together and talk about the things that America does best. If we're going to balance the budget and create jobs, Mr. President, we can't pretend that we're going to do it by eliminating earmarks and government waste. You have to look at how we did it previously. In the early 1990s, our economy was faltering because deficits were too big and debt was freezing capital. We had to send a signal to the market that we were capable of being fiscally responsible. Guess what, Mr. President? We did it. And we did it without a reckless assault on a whole series of things that make a difference to the quality of life of our country and to our ability to be able to create jobs. We saw our economy turn around in the 1990s, and we created 22 million jobs. We created unprecedented wealth in America. Every single income level in our country saw their income go up in the 1990s. We created more wealth in the 1990s than we created in the 1920s and 30s with the great barons of wealth of that period, the Carnegies and Mellons and so forth. And we did it by committing the country to a disciplined path where we spoke to the potential of the American people, working with Republicans. It was bipartisan. We came up with a framework that put our country on a track to be debt-free by 2012 for the first time since Andrew Jackson's administration. And, Mr. President, the fact is that Alan Greenspan was warning America and the Senate that we were paying down our debt too fast and that that could have implications on the marketplace. We know how to do this in a responsible way. How we got off track from that is a story I'm not going to go back into right now. It's pretty well known. But the truth of how we generated the 1990s economic boom is a story that has to be retold again and again. So let me just point out the difference here. We're not going to do this process in 2 weeks. We know that. So we ought to have a responsible CR that doesn't come back with another hatchet job, that allows us to go forward and give ourselves a proper amount of time and agree we're going to tackle these larger issues and put something serious on the table with tax reform, spending, entitlements, all of those things on the table. But what we have in this House budget, let me just point out, rather than just say it takes us backwards, I want to talk about that for a minute if I can. I believe there are reckless cuts in this budget that would do great harm to our country because it strips away our ability to be able to create the future. Research and development in technology, research and development in science, the National Institutes of Health, host of these things are just cut draconianly. I had lunch the other day with the Secretary of the Navy, and he was telling me how the House budget has cut ARPA-E, that's the energy research of ARPA, has cut it from about $250 million down to about $50 million. Effectively, shuts off all the projects. You know what some of those projects are, Mr. President? One is our military's ability to be able to have greater capacity in the field to have solar or wind or battery storage so they don't have to run convoys of fuel in order to keep vehicles and supply our troops with the administrative support that they need. They say, the military has done a study, every 24 convoys for fuel, we lose one Marine or soldier. One Marine or soldier for every 24 convoys. They're looking at ways to reduce having those convoys, and they're cutting the money so that our military will be more dependent on the fossil fuel that comes from unstable countries in various parts of the world. Mr. President, how much time do I have left?
6.5 minutes.
Thank you.